Okay, how's it going, everybody? I hope you're all doing well. Okay, well, so in today's episode, I thought I'd try to say something about the famous painting, The Scream, by the Norwegian painter Edvard Munch. If you haven't seen it, it's an image of a person standing on a bridge or a jetty who seems to be emitting a primal scream. The landscape behind this person is depicted with sweeping, curvy linear lines, and the sky is a blazy red and yellow, giving it an airy glow. This agonizing face there has become one of the most iconic images of art. Okay, well, so what's it about? Well, okay, so for many, it's taken to represent something like the anxiety of the human condition. And what does that mean exactly? Well, okay, so here I think that the philosopher Martin Heidegger might be useful. So what does he say about it, about anxiety? Well, first of all, he says that anxiety's not the same as fear. And that's because fear has an object. It has a referent. I mean, when you're afraid of something specific, right? Like a bear, say, or a snake or something. But anxiety, on the other hand, is not about anything in particular. No, it's a generalized mood that has something to do with one's existence as a whole. Now, when we're overtaken by anxiety, things seem to slip away from us, says Heidegger. They seem insignificant. And for him, this could happen at any time. I don't know, maybe we're making dinner, and then all of a sudden, what we're in the middle of doing seems meaningless and a kind of pantomime. Now, of course, we know that making dinner forms part of a normal life. But now, all of a sudden, this life of ours as a whole seems pointless. We stop and we ask ourselves questions like, what the heck's the meaning of all of this anyway? Why am I here? Who am I exactly? Okay, so what's happened here? Well, what happened is that the security of everyday routine in which the meaning of life seems well grounded and self-evident has become shattered. Now this is anxiety. And from the everyday perspective, it's a moment of meaningless confusion. And obviously, this confusion, this feeling anxiety, is deeply unsettling. And that's because we feel ungrounded and alienated from the world. Okay, now what's important to understand is that for Heidegger, this momentary feeling of anxiety, this homelessness that we feel, is actually not a small thing at all. In fact, it points to something much larger, a deeper truth about human existence. And it's this. Actually, Heidegger puts it this way. He says, homelessness is more primordial than being at home. Okay, now what does that mean? Well, it means that the first or the deeper truth is that there is no unshakable foundation for our lives and our world. And so no matter how comfortable we may be with our lives, no matter how well running the machinery of everyday life may be, we're always going to be exposed to the possibility of anxiety and a feeling of homelessness. Now, of course, most of us don't want to expose ourselves to this, right? So what do? Well, what we do is we cling to the numbing attractions of everydayness, he says. We stay within convention, within comfort, and within conformity. Now, of course, to some extent, we need to do this, right? We need to do it for our everyday routine functioning. I mean, we don't always want to be teetering on the brink of the abyss of meaninglessness. But the problem with most of us, Heidegger thinks, is that we avoid it at all costs. And that's a problem because as uncomfortable as anxiety might be, it's actually deeply, deeply illuminating. And that's because anxiety is, well, it's where the beginning of our freedom lies. in the sense that it opens up a space between us and things and others. It's here, in this sort of detached state, that we can start to begin to think freely and to become more self-aware, more ourselves, and to live more authentically. Okay, so how is all this connected to Munchs Scream? Well, like Heidegger pointed out about how this mood of anxiety can come over us at any time, something like this clearly happened to Munch himself. And it's the experience the painting was actually based on. I mean, he says it himself. He says, "I was walking along the road with two friends. The sun was setting. I felt a wave of sadness. The sky suddenly turned blood red. I stopped. I leaned against the fence, tired to death. My friends walked on, and I stood there quaking with angst, and I felt as though a vast, endless scream passed through nature. And then I painted the picture Scream." So it's Munch's momentary experience of angst here that he depicted in the Scream, which shows the figure's primal terror before the immensity and ultimate meaninglessness of the universe. Actually, it's interesting. The Norwegian title for the Scream is Skrik. And I think this is more apt since it suggests something a little more jarring, right? And a little more intense. Now that I think about it, it comes closer to the English shriek, which might have been a better translation, actually. Anyway, but what about the illuminating or constructive aspect of anxiety that I mentioned earlier? Well, it's really interesting. Munch said that he needed to experience anxiety in order to create. He said, "For as long as I can remember, I have suffered from a deep feeling of anxiety which I have tried to express in my art. Without this anxiety and this illness, I would have become like a ship without a rudder." So it seems pretty obvious then that it was his anxiety that opened him up to the sort of authenticity that characterizes his works. Actually, it's sort of interesting. In 1908, after the Scream and the Frieze of Life, he had a nervous breakdown, which was compounded by his excessive drinking, and he almost died. But after he recovered, his life became more sedentary, and his paintings became less morose and less daring, and they became more colorful and more pedestrian, you might say. Now, some critics have said that he lost something in that breakdown and in that recovery. Well, I don't know. If it's true, I wonder if it had something to do with a decrease in anxiety, a fall, as Heidegger would say, to the everydayness of things. Anyway, at the end of the day, the Scream then is much more than just a depiction of angst. Actually, in a way, I think it can serve to sometimes rescue us. It can do this by momentarily releasing us from much of the banality of our lives and the boredom that sometimes characterizes our age. And it can reconnect us with the primordial, with the homelessness that could be our conversion to a much more authentic and meaningful life. Bye for now.